this unlocks the potential for us all to have democratized access to intelligence, to be more creative. Those of us who can't draw or design now have the potential to think like a creative.
In an ever-changing world that's all about staying connected, building connections, and seeing where the next collaboration takes a marketing campaign. From an initial brief to the follow-through, what paths are going to make a campaign success more than a possibility? Hi, I'm Brett Marchand, CEO of Plus Company. This is Partners in Possibility. Welcome to another episode of Partners in Possibility. Marketing tools are only as good as the marketer who uses them. A few months ago, we sat down with Statista and Citizen Relations to understand the new wave of AI in marketing and what we as marketers could expect to see in the future. Today, we're exploring the barriers to entry for using AI and how we can fully adopt the tools in a meaningful and actionable way. Michael Cohen, Global Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Plus Company, and Crystalyn Stuart-Loayza, Chief Digital Officer at Citizen Relations Mekanism, are going to explain what exactly these barriers to entry are, how to better adopt these tools, and what the real possibilities are, not just in marketing, but in the world at large. Well, welcome, Michael and Crystalyn. We're going to have a discussion about AI and creative measurement. That might not sound like an exciting topic, but if you're a marketer, it's obviously super important. But before we dive into that, I actually thought I would reflect a little bit about, having been a client and as well as on the agency side. But I remember as a client, I did when we would do a major launch, like I launched I Am Canadian as an example at Molson, and we had to research everything, and the idea was that people wanted to know, would it work or not? Would we have success? So we were changing the label. Would that change be successful? We were putting a brand new campaign out there. Would it be successful? We had to spend a lot of money on media. Would it be successful? We launched a brand website. Would it be successful? We paid for a bunch of sponsorships that went with it. Would it be successful? And we take all this research and, either I or somebody who worked for me would have to go through these research reports and figure out, and predict whether, it was going to work or not and what decisions we would make. So I say that because with AI and the power of AI, AI can read every research study ever done. It can take in proprietary research. It can read everything that's on the internet, including demographic data, and it even use synthetic data, as I'm sure we'll talk about, to fill in the gaps where we don't have answers. And can do it in a matter of seconds what, I and a team at Molson, would have taken probably hundreds of years to come up with the same kind of insights and predictions. Does that ring true with you guys, first of all?
Yeah, for sure it does. I think certainly the amount of manpower and brain power that went into every single decision, still only to have sort of a percentage of those decisions be accurate in market, is certainly the way the world has been for a lot of us operating in marketing. And good thing we're moving towards a period where we have a lot more rigor and solutions we can provide than where we were.
So why do you think, Michael, I think our Statista study said that only about half or 54% of marketers have actually implemented AI into their marketing processes. Given the incredible role it could play, given how marketing has been done and how much it relies on prediction and research, what do you think's in the way? What are the barriers?
People don't know where to start. There's a lot out there, and it's pretty general. So we're still having a long way to go in the application layer, and we're about to move into a period in which there'll be more applications that are more relatable for these sort of users, more natural for them to use, rather than just say, oh, here's a GPT, figure out how to be more productive and do great things with this. Isn't necessarily an easy starting place. And of course, initially the costs are high if you're talking about outfitting an organization. Whether it's big or small, if it's small, the costs are lower, but the stakes are higher for a small organization to buy a bunch of seats and licenses.
And I know, Crystalyn, you both are in front of clients a lot. You in particular, as a chief digital officer, decline to see the potential of AI?
Yeah, I think overall we're starting to see a real move from thinking of AI as sort of a theoretical way to maybe save costs on production or on productivity into a lot of our clients really seeing the fundamental sort of systems level change that AI can drive for them in their business. I know, some of the statistics that came out of this recent report talked about a huge part of this is that, while maybe 90% of our clients see the possibility of leveraging AI to measure, let's say, creative effectiveness, such a few percentage of them, less than 30% of them, are even able to start to operationalize that, because it isn't just about adding one element to the mix. It's about changing fundamentally how we're running creative end to end. And I think that, frankly, is one of the biggest barriers, is really just the human disruption of sort of workflow and mindset, and be able to integrate system solutions into their ways of running creative. That's why it takes so long.
Right. Michael, maybe you could talk a little bit about how AI can do creative measurements, because, I mean, again, the old way was you took your creative concepts, first of all, you tested them either in qualitative groups, and then you did quantitative testing, and you asked them to, how distinctive is it? Do you remember the brand? Does it make you want to buy it? Stuff like that. And then obviously you'd put it in market, and you could do some A/B testing by showing different versions to different people. But that's sort of been historically what marketers did. How does it work with AI?
What we've seen with the explosion in computation, the ability to have large models, I'll use the large language models as an example, as people are becoming familiar with it, is that the number of tokens that it's trained on, the number of parameters in the model is just massive. That's how it can produce the beauty of the complex English language in ways that we find acceptable when it comes out. And if you think about creative, there's a lot of information about creative just in it, whether it's an image or a message. You can imagine tokens that relate to the different language, the image, the customers that are exposed to it, the music, the inflection points in it, the cadence, the accent. Like, all of these things can be broken down into finer components that you can train into a model such that it can derive new components, like the same way the human brain does, right? These things are architected based on the inspiration of what nature has done in ourselves. So when you can do that, then you can imagine different renditions of, which is creativity of things. For one, you can relate it to the individuals that you aim to influence. And the differences in them, like how they experience that creative and what sort of communication vehicle, and then what behaviors it elicits in them. When you have all of those things together, you have a direct measurement of how that creative is going to, elicit a behavior that you care about, either from a business perspective or a societal perspective, in a directly measurable way. And once you have that, you can ask, well, how do I do it differently? What if I want to try this other thing? What is the world going to look like under that scenario? And that's how it works. I mean, it's breaking it down into very small pieces and building it up however you'd like, to tell you directly what you need to know.
Crystalyn, how do you see clients using AI right now to test the creative effectiveness?
I think we're at such an important point where there is a fundamental shift in the way that clients are beginning to mount these types of annual plans and brand level campaigns or big brand acts, in that historically the way that creative has been developed is sort of like a waterfall. It's sort of at the top, and we're developing our big platform, and then we're launching sort of a campaign and market. We may have some market signals or testing in advance, but then it goes over this cliff. There's an enormous gap. And when it hits the bottom, then you have all of your day-to-day business as usual assets, your CRM, your social content, your DCO, your programmatic, all these different assets in market that are sort of the swirl at the bottom. And we have lost the chance to frankly even evaluate all those assets against a single set of effectiveness pillars. Further, we're not connecting them back to the bigger brand message or any of the core platforms. So there's been this big disconnect, even in the way we've siloed our teams, our agencies, and certainly our measurement models, that has to be fixed to take advantage of what Michael just called out, this really great approach to creative effectiveness. But we can do it now because we have the power of AI to help us sort of close that gap. And, we talk often about the creative flywheel, the art of connecting all those elements together in order to use those real-time signals and insights to, in real time, affect creative at all scale and level.
Mm.
And this requires us not only to use the technology, but to change some of our ways of working as brand marketers and even as agencies.
And when you say silo, you mean because at one end somebody's creating a brand campaign that's then, driving image and or affiliation with the brand and or consideration. And at the other end, people are like doing lower funnel campaigns that are like just
Yeah.
trying to get you to click and buy or.
Yeah. And even mid funnel. I mean, this is an era we're coming into where a lot of even CPG brands are realizing they've neglected a lot of that middle funnel, like first point of experience for customers. They're building content strategies for site without thinking about a landing experience from an ad unit. They're developing CRM content that's totally disparate from what they're pushing in their loyalty programs or inside of their social. And so part of this is also about how we're thinking about organizing our creative messaging so that we then can measure it and work in a much more synergistic and effective way, really like powered by AI. And it gives us the license and chance to do all of those things.
I had Ted Gerard on the podcast to talk about the Versus campaign at Sick Kids. One of the things we talked about is not just that the campaign drew people to the cause of building a new hospital, but also it drove like day-to-day stuff. Like people on Facebook were talking more about it, and it drove $10 a month donations and not just, big foundational donations, et cetera. And the secret there was that it was completely, to your point, it was aligned, right? What was said in almost all the channels was very similar to what was said at a brand standpoint. And there was an interaction between all of those things that proved to be super effective. So I guess if we would have put the Versus campaign through EOS, we probably would have seen that.
Yeah. I would also just add, I think we're coming into a really exciting time because of the sort of capabilities of machines that Michael just illuminated. We have the chance now for brand and performance to come together in greater ways, for creative and media to come together in greater ways, for us to really bring forward a much more synergistic approach to the way we build relationships with customers. And I think that's such an exciting part of what creative effectiveness unlocks is bringing all of those elements together, but in service of better brand outcomes.
Right.
Probably lower costs in the long run, but also certainly better customer experience, which I think is what makes all of this like even more worthwhile. The impact is going to be shown to us through customer response.
Yeah. And the kind of personalization you're going to be able to do that actually presumably will get us to a place where you're going to show me stuff I want to see and that I enjoy and laugh at or cry at or whatever the case may be, instead of showing me stuff that, I don't like. Presumably it can help do that too, right, Michael?
For sure. And one thing I want people to realize is that we've started to see examples of AI where the outputs are multimodal, as we call them, right? You have images and sounds, and it can put together a video from some images you put in. But the inputs are actually, in some of the newer stuff that will be coming out, are multimodal, meaning that it can take as inputs everything from gene sequences to audio, where you're actually picking up differences in accent, inflection, and all those things, along with text, along with images, and then put those together in a certain way. So for anybody that works in the creative space and tries to come up with big ideas that are meant to influence people, it's that multimodal sort of inputs that they have in their brain naturally that helps them come up with their big ideas. And with AI's ability to do that and just do it at such scale, right? It's not tired. It's not, it can hold everything in its head at once. Basically, we're on the cusp of a creativity explosion.
I guess the other thing is time, right? Like being able to get signals and insights on a real-time basis has got to be helpful for developing effective campaigns for clients.
Yeah, I think real time is an important facet of this. We're trying to take in huge volumes of data and quickly turn those into actionable motions that are also integrated motions, not just sort of single point content or a single response, but really integrated campaign level motions. And that sort of real time dynamic requires a shift in the way our talent is working. And we're really starting to recast a lot of the different roles and functions of different key players who will play a part of being able to operationalize like real time optimization and impact that comes from AI. And that's everything from changing the way our strategists are functioning, starting to build connections based experience for a number of our strategists and even our tacticians, starting to train our creatives to really better understand how to be creative analysts and better understand how to take in those signals and apply them quickly to sort of an on-brand creative message. And it certainly changes the way our analysts work overall, in that instead of kind of spending a lot of their time distilling information, they're spending more time actioning it and putting it into an insight-driven model. And this takes time to train our talent and to get them accustomed to working this way. But we're seeing huge gains in especially our middle level talent who are really embracing this call to work differently and seeing the benefits in their own day-to-day productivity pretty quickly, really, as we introduce them to more of the platform usage that they have.
Michael, maybe talk a little bit about synthetic data and how that can help with researching ideas and or figuring out or predicting whether they're going to be effective or not.
The idea is that with the information that you have, you can get the information that you need and want. So there's lots of signals that you do have access to, but it's often doesn't come in the form of what you want to actually answer the question. But there's lots of information in it. So prediction can actually help translate the data that you have, whether it's at a more aggregate level, whether it can be combined with different sources of information about audience, about the creative and the media vehicle and the context, all of those sort of things. And the effectiveness of it are all signals about data that you don't have. And then you can predict it, and the prediction can be very accurate. In fact, we always find that the prediction looks more business representative than deterministic data, because deterministic data suffers from, how we collect it and when it's available, or that it's behind a walled garden, or that it's properly protected by privacy.
And biases.
Yeah, that's always going to be the case. So we've spent the last 20 years pretending that we were going to be able to create the perfect deterministic data or put it in a clean room or something like that and be able to do it. And the answer is we're never going to be able to, but prediction can give us exactly what we want. And it looks actually more representative of the business because it can solve that complex. I describe it as a Sudoku puzzle, right? There's information you have and there's information you don't, and it can solve that very complex puzzle to give you the data you need. Well, once you have that data, then you can build all sorts of other applications and use other AIs on it.
So back to my story at the beginning. So I've got this new label for my beer. I can actually test that label without actually showing it to real humans and show it to, and basically AI can predict how they would react to that new label and tell me whether it's going to sell more than the old label or the other options I have.
It would be even better because it would be based on human behavior, not human statement.
Right.
It would. People don't tell you what they actually do, but with data synthesis, you can use actual behavior to tell you, so it's more powerful.
I have noticed that's another behavioral shift that's taking a little bit of time for brand marketers to adapt to, especially client side, is we're so used to asking, like, what happened last year and how does that compare to this year? And what can we learn from the past? And how is our learning agenda rooted in like past progress? And I think this shift in time orientation towards really looking ahead and leveraging data to do more predictive activations instead of always spending all of our time looking backwards because of what we can do through some of these technologies does require like a bit of a mind shift change when we look at quarterly business reviews, when we do annual planning. It's an important kind of shift for us to make.
Or even just trying to sell your CEO that this is the right label, even though you've never shown it to a human. Because it does take a leap of faith to understand how AI really works, right? And why. So I'm sure that'll be a barrier for some.
Well, it's not just the big ideas that we're testing and like using synthetic data on. It's also like the campaign go-to-market strategies. I think that this has some of the most profound effects on, so many corporations have like codified a checklist of a launch strategy. You know, they have like a canned go-to-market approach when they're releasing a new product or a new SKU. And I think what we're trying to move people towards is understanding we can use a lot of this predictive technology to help us actually build the right alchemy for a launch, and be able to gather real-time insights and make adjustments to that instead of always having to use the same playbook, which is exciting.
Yeah, I remember from my P&G days, 1,500 GRPs per week for a launch. That was sort of like the standard. And as you say, there's probably, especially given the product and the competitive set and the way the world's changed, and obviously people don't just use GRPs anymore, but optimizing that using AI will be super interesting. I'm sure there's like a million better ways to do it than just that traditional.
Yeah, beyond even just channel mix, like also the type of content we're putting out into the world, the mix of assets, instead of your traditional list of 60s and 15s and cut downs and graphics, like we're actually able to produce a higher volume of assets and put them in market faster so we can change our production strategies also, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I mean, that leads, you mentioned the creative flywheel or creative effectiveness flywheel earlier. Maybe just talk a little bit about that and how it works. I'm interested in both your perspective on it because I think it's a super interesting concept.
Yeah, I mean, without the diagram, I'll just have to visualize it for you. But the idea is to close down this gap and really begin to connect all the parts of creative, measurement, activation, and strategy together. And what this does is by putting AI sort of at the center to power this model, we can supercharge each of the individual parts. We can do way more in creative and production than ever before. We can measure at a much more regular capacity. We have the ability to activate and personalize, and we have the chance to bring strategy to a whole new level with real-time insights and faster real-world data, plus the predictive capabilities. But what's really exciting is not only is it connecting and supercharging each of those parts, but when it's all working together, it starts to create this like very seamless, very proactive motion where the individuals are working in concert in service of overall impact. And so you almost see no divide between those functions. You almost see no divide in terms of the time it takes to produce and adapt our creative. And you most certainly see higher impact on every single move you make because of how fast and rapid this motion is enabling effectiveness. And we're really beginning to move this into the center of our strategy for a lot of our core customers, aligning ourselves and our technology and their internal operations to support this flywheel effect.
So is the way I should understand this is that you go from sort of the old batch process, right? Come up with the strategy, then do the creative, test the creative, then decide, how you're going to put it in market, then measure how it did in market, then take that measurement and go back and change the strategy, et cetera. It goes really from a batch process to, sounds like a real-time process where each thing is being impacted and changed on the fly, as you call it, with a flywheel based on what the signals are coming from the market.
Yeah, you've talked about system change often on this podcast, Brett, with various guests, and this is the system change going from sequential to going multi-threaded at the same time. So you're rearranging the process and then how you put people into it, and it performs better. It's like a big shift, a seismic shift upward as a result of being able to go from that sequential to multi-threaded and fast construct.
Can it also give direction on who to target, where to target, what to sell, where to put your emphasis, what price to, how big could this be? How expansive?
All of those things. And I think initially we're applying the flywheel as like an alternative, to your point, to the traditional sort of waterfall approach, the way we develop creative. But what we're finding is as we begin to implement, we are not only finding the capability to make much more progress around the rapid adaptations of this, but the types of ways that we're adjusting the work are very widespread. So we're able to implement bigger learning agendas than ever before without having to have enormous test and learn budgets. And we can actively work to answer much more difficult and burning questions that our customers have, not just about ROI or ROAS effectiveness, which is traditional learning agendas are often focused on.
ROAS being return on advertising spend.
Precisely. I think, we can answer those questions, certainly, but we also can start to answer bigger business level questions, like which of my audience cohorts are most likely to have a collapsed journey and move faster to conversion? How might I define influence in the way that this target audience is moving in its relationship with my business? And we're really up-leveling our learning agendas and our integrated measurement models because we can now effectively and affordably run those in real time.
Super interesting. And I mean, you can see this working not just in marketing of products and services, but also presumably for charities, for politicians, this is, how broad do you think this could be as far as the kinds of industries and organizations that impacts?
Yeah, I mean, we're just giving one very clear case of where this idea applies in our industry, but there's every reason to believe that it can work in anybody's industry. I mean, we see it working in different industries as it relates to communications, the industry that we're in. Anywhere where that matters, everything from education to, education is just a big area, whether it's about policy and communication of government policy and the effectiveness of our media system or the way that we educate children. All of these things are open to impact from this sort of responsive system that can very quickly monitor what's going on in that interaction with the human and respond to it in a way that affects the outcome with them, whether it be a learning goal or whether we're trying to influence somebody to vote for our favorite political candidate.
And Crystalyn, will there be a need for agencies or even marketers in the future, given what AI can do?
Yeah, I love the proposition of the agency of the future. I think it's so exciting because I have always worked as more of a generalist type practitioner. And I think this unlocks the potential for us all to have democratized access to intelligence, to be more creative. Those of us who can't draw or design now have the potential to think like a creative, to be an analyst without having to work inside of a dashboard or manage sort of critical data feeds on a daily basis. It democratizes access to so much of our discipline. I still think that, everybody says this, human ideation, human strategy, our ability to think ahead and use the technology as a superpower is probably where we're going to be for the next, several years. But the idea that maybe we can do more with less and maybe have more time with our families and still be as productive as we are today actually seems like an awesome proposition to me, and one that our young talent seems to be getting behind for sure.
Yeah. I had Avi Goldfarb, who I know you both know, on a podcast, and he had this interesting analogy around what happened with websites. When people had to code them themselves, there were lots of websites being built, and then along came software that made that much easier, whether it was no code or low code or whatever. And suddenly the number of websites and apps, et cetera, exploded, right? So you just had more people being able to do them and do them much more efficiently. I agree with you. I think that's what's going to happen for marketers and agency people. They're just going to be able to do a lot more.
Yeah. Engineers of everything they need in front of them, which is a brilliant role for smart people to play.
Last word to you, Michael. So where do you see this going? Like, I don't know, take us a year or two out. And I know we talked about system change, but what do you think the role of AI is going to be in organizations, who get over this barrier of adopting it?
It relates to what we were just talking about. And, I'm sort of stealing this from something I heard from Jensen Huang recently. He was on a podcast with Bill Gurley and Brad Gerstner, their BG2 podcast. And he said, listen, we're heading towards a world where everybody's going to be their own CEO, where we didn't talk much about agentic architecture, but it's the idea that you very quickly can spin up your own staff of AIs with different abilities and talents and be the CEO of them. And that's what the world is likely to look like. I believe in that, right? And we believe in agentic AI as a path for scaling, among other paths for scaling AI. And it gives more individuals control. It's like this, we're talking about human in the loop of AI, like how much easier can it be than allowing humans to be more in control of their own destiny versus having to work in organizations and communicate with each other that can't be as efficient as we like to think it is. I think we'll see more of that, whether it's moving. We're talking about the creative flywheel in particular. It will allow individuals to have greater access to the things that need to be put together to do great things, whether it's great campaigns or bring great ideas to market.
Yeah. Well, listen, as the CEO of Plus Company, I welcome all of you to be CEOs as well. It's a great vocation. So listen, thank you for this discussion. Super fascinating. We could probably talk about this for hours, or at least I could. But I'm really looking forward to what the future is like. And thank you for all the work you guys are doing in order to make AI come to life in our company.
Thank you for letting us talk about it here.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Partners in Possibility. I really have to thank both Michael Cohen, Global Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Plus Company, and Crystalyn Stuart-Loayza, Chief Digital Officer at Citizen Relations Mekanism, for providing their thoughts on how we can utilize AI and how AI can predict and measure the future success of marketing campaigns.